Yeah, well, before that, the reason I was even in California is because, as an investigative journalist and doing all these topics that most people won't cover, I got a tip from two truck drivers starting October 5th. Was the first truck driver. October 8th was the second truck driver. And what these two truck drivers were reporting to me was that they were hired to transport truckloads of illegal ballots. They said that this was all coming from a port in Tacoma, Washington, a port parking lot, which, by the way, for people that want to see receipts on all this stuff, you could go to americahappens.com and there's a piece called Motherlode of California Ballot Trafficking. There's also a piece called The Third Assassin documentary preview, and then there's another one called Geriatric Terrorism. Between those three, you'll see receipts for all the stories that I'm talking about now.
Hmm.
So I get these tips that these guys have evidence that 150 semi trucks and trailers have been hired by a trucking company. They give me the trucking company's name. They send me receipts on who these individuals are. They send me receipts, bills of lading, I think it's called. Accidentally, we said bills of landing in that short preview, but apparently it's bills of lading. And essentially, these show that this is actually going on. It shows the company that's doing it. It shows the people that are basically hired to do this ballot trafficking. And these ballots are crossing state lines going to Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and especially California. A lot of the trucks are going to California. So these two individuals are definitely patriots, and they feel as though they're part of the scam that is being used to steal 2024. At that time, I know that me and all of my colleagues were very worried that election 2024 was going to be stolen, like what we all think happened with 2020.
Hmm.
And so
Okay, can
once
you
I get,
pause right there? Because I'm like really confused, like with the ballots. Like, are they empty ballots or are
yeah,
they?
blank ballots.
So why are they coming out of Washington and going to all these states?
Exactly, yeah. Well, what I do know, and this was discovered during that week, is that they're dropping off these truckloads of ballots at post offices where there's not authorized individuals that are collecting the ballots. So we know that it's crossing state lines, which is illegal. We know it's coming from a port in Tacoma, Washington, and one of the whistleblowers says that these definitely came off of ships that dock at the port. And he
Oh,
said that he knew this because the cranes are positioned in a way where when they're not being used, they're positioned in one way. When they've just been used, they're positioned in another way, right? So when
mhm.
he's picking up the ballots, it's clear that they were just being used. So he automatically suspects that these are coming off of ships from overseas. Now, we had investigators actually get involved. So Patrick Byrne, who's been big on exposing the ballot fraud, gets his investigators involved. Then his investigators track down that these are actually coming from Asia, these ships, and
Okay.
uh, and
So
because
basically, foreigners voted for something and then they traffic those ballots inside.
foreigners definitely, according to the evidence we have in place, shipped those ballots.
Right.
They were loaded up into these 150 semi trucks and trailers, and they're distributed at post offices all around the country, or all around the southern western United States, all the way to Colorado, Arizona, New Mexico, and
Hmm.
especially California. And
Okay.
so then we do some research on this particular trucking company. We find that the two principals of the trucking company have criminal files, but none of them have done a day in jail or prison. And so that now we're talking about these investigators that have worked with Patrick Byrne, but also worked in intelligence. And they're saying that has the hallmark of individuals that have done essentially bad things that are on the hook to what Trump would call the deep state. So
Mhm.
that all it starts being very concerning. So what happens is that I have a shotgun and a handgun. I put it in the back of my SUV. They're lawfully purchased shotguns and handguns because I'm going to go do surveillance at one
Mhm.
of the truck stops that they're going to be congregating. Now, these truck stops are in what I would call dangerous locations because these are, one of them was in Lubec, California. And also, the truck drivers were instructed that they can't just pull over to any truck stop to go to the bathroom. They have to be chaperoned. They had constant security around them. They had to be all together. They couldn't, just freely drive into any truck stop that they wanted. They had to
Yeah.
stop at these particular stops. So
Right.
all that stuff's very concerning. All of it seems very shady, and certainly the
Mhm.
truck drivers themselves are like, this is very unusual, right? So
Mhm.
I decide I'm going to drive to California with the purpose of going to one of these truck stops, the one in Lubec, California, to observe and collect more information on the trucks that are congregated there.
Uh-huh.
Now, I traveled to California on October 8th. That evening, I go to the James O'Keefe premiere for Line in the Sand, which was in Newport Beach. I was invited to that. And
Mhm.
crazy enough, apparently Chad Bianco was there too because he's also friends with James O'Keefe. We just never
Okay.
met each other there.
Uh-huh.
My friend Nicole talks about how she took a picture of me and then did a 90-degree turn and took a picture of Chad Bianco. She was like, you guys were practically standing back to back. So
Wow.
after that event, and this is post midnight, so now we're October 9, I drive up to Lubec, California. It's about a 3-hour drive from Newport. And I go to this truck stop. I document a lot of the trucks that are there and collect more information. And that's also in that mother lode of California ballot trafficking piece that I have. And then from that point, the next morning, I find out through friends of mine that Trump is having a rally in Coachella. And I decide to stay a little bit longer to
Mhm.
go to that rally and meet up with some of my friends. I contact my friend who runs the Clark County Republican Party, and because I ran for office and I've been to like at this point I'd been to like 2 dozen Trump events, including ones where it's in small locations where he's right in front of me. It's like I've had that kind of clearance. So I get special entry passes sent to me, and the special entry passes specifically state on there that you're going to park at a parking lot 1.2 miles away, and there's no entrance by foot. You have to take a shuttle to go to the rally. So
Mhm.
one of the biggest lies that Chad Bianco and individuals in his campaign and his sheriff's department have tried to propagate is that I went into a Trump rally with guns, which the ticket themselves make it clear that that's not possible because when you park, you have to park 1.2 miles away, get in a shuttle, and then be taken down to the Trump rally. So
Mhm.
at best, and I wasn't even in the parking lot. At best, the accusation that they could get that could say is that I was 1.2 miles away from a Trump rally,
Right.
not even at the parking lot. So
Yeah.
there's not much meat to those bones, but he tried to sell that to the people. He tried to repeat that lie.
Mhm.
And as a result, I've been attacked and harassed for the last 18 months, including my parents, but that's a different story. So I drive to Coachella on October 12th, and before I even try to enter the parking lot that's 1.2 miles away from the rally, I decided to do what I thought was the right thing to do, which I drove up to a deputy and I said, hey, I'm from Nevada. I got a couple of lawful firearms. I work with the Trump campaign, thinking that any logical individual would be like, all right, let's search this guy. Okay, he's not an Antifa member. He's if he parks his car, he's going to be 1.2 miles away from the rally. He did
Mhm.
the right thing. But what happens at that, and I even offered for them to hold on to the firearms if there was an issue, thinking
Mhm.
that they might just tell me to make a U-turn and go home. I thought that was the worst case scenario that I had to drive back home. But instead, what happens after I offer for them to hold on to my firearms, one deputy makes me pull over. And I have new information, by the way, about what happened there because they asked me to pull over. Another deputy comes, probably a few minutes later, asks me the same questions. I answer the questions. All of this is recorded, by the way, and available because
Mhm.
I have a little handheld recorder that I take with me everywhere, like this little
Mhm.
thing, which I use for jotting down ideas and stuff. Well,
Mm-hmm.
since I was having an interaction with the cops, before I even drove up to the deputy, I started recording and put this in my cup holder. And had I not done that until today, I would have most likely been in prison right now because this
Yeah.
was the audio evidence that showed that everything Chad Bianco said was a lie.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially, I tell the second deputy this. He asks me to get out of my car, puts me in handcuffs, right? What I've learned recently is that Chad Bianco, between the moment that I arrived, told the first guy and then the second guy, okay, Chad Bianco was notified, and apparently he told his deputies to arrest me under any circumstances, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Any circumstances, because he had an agenda, he had a crazy idea in his head. He knew that the entire world media was looking at this Coachella Trump rally, and he decided to capitalize on that,
Mm-hmm.
even though what he was trying to do was complete fraud. It was a crime. You don't accuse somebody of things that that person didn't do.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially, they put me in handcuffs. First I'm in put in a very hot cruiser, and I was pre-diabetic at that time. They didn't let me have my supplements. I passed out a few times in the cruiser because it was
God.
110 degrees outside, but probably
Wow.
140 inside the cruiser. They didn't even turn on the air condition. Really tortured me. And this is very relevant because there's also another case where they let a diabetic man die in one of their jails, which Chad
Wow.
Bianco is being sued on now. And that's also on my social media, Not Vet Miller, where you could download this. So
Mm-hmm.
complete, like just willing to torture and harm people for this. I call him a criminal. I think Chad Bianco is a criminal using his badge under color of law. So
Mm-hmm.
anyway, they take me to the police station. The FBI and Secret Service come, and they don't even want to interview me. They just look at me and they decide to leave, which is not what the FBI and Secret Service
Yeah.
does if they even suspect you of being there to do harm. My
Mm-hmm.
guess is they probably researched my background. They quickly deciphered that this was nothing,
Yeah.
and they didn't even decide to pursue it. Nonetheless, I'm thrown into jail. 5 hours later, at 1:30 in the morning, I'm released. They just
Mm-hmm.
give me a citation. There was no bail. That was
Right.
also false information that came out of the Riverside Sheriff's Department. Next morning, I wake up, and by 9 a.m., I'm realizing that I'm essentially they're accusing somebody of being this Trump assassin, but they're not using my name. And a couple of hours later, they start using my name, my picture, every
Mm-hmm.
single version of me that you could imagine, fat version, skinny version, with glasses, without glasses. They already know all my background. I
Uh-huh.
also learned later on that at 6:30 in the morning, Chad Bianco sent a text to the media
Mm-hmm.
saying that when I drove up, I said, I am here to kill President T. Like he actually said I made verbal
Wow.
statements. And again, if I didn't have this recording, I wouldn't be able to prove that everything was he was saying was a lie.
Yeah.
He had a massive press conference, and at the same time, the FBI and Secret Service released a statement saying that President Trump was in no harm. Nonetheless, Chad Bianco has a press conference. He says that I'm the third Trump assassin. I'm a lunatic. I was there 100% to cause harm. He calls me a sovereign citizen, anti-government group, which
What
also
does
doesn't
that
make
even mean? Sovereign citizen?
that like I'm anti-government, but that doesn't really make sense because when you look at what a sovereign citizens don't run for office. They don't support government candidates,
Uh-huh.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Also, the two firearms in question are not assassination tools. Like the last time anybody was killed with a handgun or a shotgun was like World War One, like close range. Like you can't; those weapons are they're not high-powered rifles. So, but also he said things like my car was in disarray, and it wasn't. It was a 2024 SUV, and we're in 2024 when this happened. And
Mm-hmm.
I have a receipt from a car wash in Los Angeles where I paid $31 for a car wash, complete clean the day before. But
Mm-hmm.
he's trying to paint this picture of,
Yeah, like you're a lunatic, right?
like a Unabomber or
Yeah.
like a James Bond born kind of guy, you know?
Uh-huh.
And he's
Yeah.
trying to heighten it with all these lies. And I realized what's happening. I quickly put a video together that I released that night with the true version events. By the way,
Mm-hmm.
my car's impounded, so I don't have this thing with me. And I'm thinking they probably found it and scrubbed all the audio.
Right.
And then he lies that whole week. He goes on a
Mm-hmm.
media tour. He says his same lie over again. And then a week later, I get my car back, and fortunately, that recorder is in the car, and I start releasing the real audio. And
Mm-hmm.
only
Wow.
until only after that happened, on October 24, I think it was, he finally says, well, he might have not been there to harm Trump. Only after that was revealed. So you understand
Uh-huh.
this little
Yeah.
$40 recorder
Mm-hmm.
saved me, because if I didn't have this
I
until
know.
today,
Yeah.
we'd be still talking about who said the truth or lies, you know?
Right. You got lucky.
So
They didn't find it.
yeah, I got
That's
really
very
lucky.
fortunate. Yeah.
I got really lucky, and the crazy thing is on the recorder, because that thing ran until it ran out of battery. So it ran for like 20 hours. You actually hear deputies within the sheriff's department saying, this is nothing. We should let this guy go.
So it kept
Um,
on recording the
it
whole
kept
time.
on recording. It kept
Wow.
on recording as they ransacked my car, as they tried
Uh-huh.
their best to find something. And obviously they were given an order to prosecute me, persecute me, regardless of the truth. And this is Chad Bianco. This is one of the most corrupt sheriffs ever. This man, I believe, belongs behind bars. And I've been instrumental in the last 17 months of releasing a lot of content and receipts to show what a bad person he is. I've
Mhm.
spoken to deputies within his department that are terrified of him, that I mean, his department absolutely despises him. The only people that rise in his department are the ones that are equally corrupt.
Mhm.
For example, one of his main guys is a former meth dealer. That's something that is provable that he so he basically surrounded himself with anybody, again, very Epstein file-esque,
Mhm.
where they're willing to be criminals using their badge under color of law to forward a power agenda.
Mhm.
But what I could tell you is most of the department despises him, but they're also terrified of him, because in the past, when people have stood up to Chad Bianco, like you have the Vicky Flores case, who's a whistleblower, you have Frank, I can't remember his last name, but Frank is currently in a lawsuit with him. Any one of these individuals that has stood up to him and said, dude, you can't do that. That's criminal and corrupt. Well, Chad Bianco tries to frame them. Chad Bianco threatens them. Chad Bianco uses government resources like helicopters to go terrorize these individuals. I've heard stories where cops that have not fallen in line with Chad Bianco's corruption, which by the way, using the helicopter sets costs $25,000 minimum every
Mhm.
time you fire it up, and then
Yeah.
depending on how long you run it. So he'll have these helicopters going on top of somebody's house,
Yeah.
roam there,
Wow.
shine the light. He's had battalions of police officers show up to people's homes, and he'll say, "Oh, this we're doing a welfare check," but it's very obvious their goal is to threaten and intimidate. So
Mhm.
and he's been known to cover up manslaughters, murders, drug dealers. There was um, fentanyl drug dealer that was caught with 500,000 fentanyl tabs. That's one
Mhm.
of his employees. He's covered up DUI incidents for friends where people were injured. Just a real gangster bad guy. And so for the
Mhm.
last 17, 18 months, oh, by the way, after the original incidents on October 13, Chad Bianco got a number of bad cops. There was about 10 or 11 LVMPD police officers, two of them that were the bad cops. This is actually reflected in the geriatric terrorism piece, where
Mhm.
they show up to my parents' home to threaten and intimidate him, and to break in without a warrant.
Mhm.
And I've been told by many officers that are in his department or retired, honorably retired individuals, that tell me, look, the goal was one of two things. So the two bad police officers were basically, or sheriff's deputies in in Clark County, Las Vegas. Well, one was a sergeant, the other one was a deputy. They were propagating false information. So at this point, I've been released. This is October 14, around 5 p.m. But these two guys are spreading lies amongst the group. And the lies that they're spreading is that I killed my parents and then went to kill Trump. Okay. And that my parents' bodies are rotting inside the house. And I came back after trying to kill Trump to basically hide inside this house.
Uh-huh.
Using that, they try to get all the other officers, really amped up, really, kind of angry, I guess you could say. And they're trying to get into my parents' home, thinking that I'm there.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, my parents were inside at first. They were quiet because they're terrified. Their
Yeah.
son is all over the news being called an assassin.
Mm-hmm.
And but eventually my parents let it be known that they're inside the house. They're asking the officers to leave. This is all in this geriatric terrorism piece. The officers will not leave. They are aggressively trying to break into the house, right?
Mm-hmm.
Luckily, I know a lot of activists. My friend Steve Sanson shows up to the house, who's somebody that's been exposing police corruption for 30 years, is one of the OGs, and that's because my mom called him terrified, saying, "Steve, this all this craziness is happening. Could you come help us?" Well, Steve
Mm-hmm.
Sanson shows up, says that you guys don't have a warrant, you have to leave. They threaten Steve Sanson for obstructing justice to have him arrested.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but luckily, Steve Sanson knows a lot of police officers and knows a lot of the sheriff, knows the governor, and he starts making phone calls, knows a lot of judges,
Mm-hmm.
and he has them back down from this because they knew that now we're getting into trouble.
Yeah.
I want to be clear that out of these 10, 11 officers, you could hear a lot of them doubting the sergeant's motives.
Mm-hmm.
You could hear him saying, "Look, this is nothing. The guy was released."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But nonetheless, you hear the sergeant pushing the agenda. And what I've been told by these Riverside County honorably retired, captains, sergeants, deputies, is that the goal was one of two things, which is to, if you're inside the house, they're probably going to shoot you dead and say that you're reaching for something. Or once they got into the house, they're going to plant some kind of evidence to
Mm-hmm.
justify what Chad Bianco did, you know?
Right.
And that's kind of where we are. I have a lawsuit against Chad Bianco in Riverside County.
Mm-hmm.
But more important than that, I've spent the last 17 months on a daily level exposing Chad Bianco, following every lead.
Mm-hmm.
There's a litany, huge list. We made a list. It's a 4.5 page list, bullet points
Mm-hmm.
of bad things Chad Bianco has done.